Step into the shadowy realm of Paranormal M, where haunting tales await. Don't forget to hit subscribe and turn on notifications. Let the mysteries unravel before your eyes. Very small headless figure. I used to talk to my dead grandpa when I was a little kid. Didn't even remember it. My dad was the one who told me, and he don't believe in ghosts. I regularly saw a translucent figure walk around the house, standing next to my bed. Human-sized black figure swinging between trees at midnight. That was during my childhood up in my teenage years. Then it slowly disappeared by itself. Fast forward to today. I can still sense paranormal presence, especially when I spend a few days and weeks in a new place. The last time I actually saw a translucent figure walking around was like 15 years ago when I first moved to my first owned house, and never again. 5 years ago, I built a holiday beach house in an island, and 2 years ago we moved to another house close to my first owned house, but I never saw anything on both new house. I sensed strong presence on the yard of my beach house, which was confirmed by the local elder, but never saw anything. Turned out my second daughter is kind of inheriting my sense. She regularly pointed and proclaimed seeing a person walking around in my bedroom when she was 2 or 5 years old. None of my other 2 children ever did that. Same as me, but much earlier she stopped seeing spirits and never mentioned anything paranormal anymore. She's 13 now. We visited my dad's house this Christmas holiday. I'm still here in my dad's house right now. Since my mom's passing 3 years ago, his house became creepier and creepier. 4 years ago, when my mom was first diagnosed with cancer, I witnessed the sound and vibration of wooden chairs being dragged back and forth on wooden floor on the second floor at 1 a.m. Twice, 2 days in a row, when no one was up there. It was so violent and angry sounding. Of course, everybody except my wife just laughed at me when I told the experience. I was convinced that this house is evil. 2 days ago at 1 a.m., my second daughter, who used to see things, ran away from my dad's room. There were 3 of my kids, my niece and my dad, bunking together in my dad's room that night. She was never scared of ghosts ever. Never laughed when watching a scary horror movie, but this time I can tell that she's really afraid. I calmly asked what she saw. She said she saw a small cardboard-sized headless figure sitting on my dad's rack. And as she keeps staring on this headless figure, the face suddenly popped up from the headless figure and she freaked out. Never ever before. I'm a bit freaked out right now, and this enforces my thoughts that this house is evil. As far as I know, friendly, harmless spirit will always take shape of a normal human being. Anything this weird, out of shape, is definitely sent by the devil himself. What is it? Busy convincing my dad to move back to his proven clean and good old house right now. Any house sounds okay. Something strange happened to me as a child. When I was 2 or 3 years old, I remembered that the night was starless. The darkness was immense, and the only thing that illuminated the environment was my house and a lamppost that was on the street. At that time, our house didn't have bars and the street was dirt. I don't know what time it was, but I think it was around 9 or 10 p.m. and I was outside playing. Just then, a man appears out of nowhere and calls me. He was a Caucasian man with light blue eyes, white hair, and pale white skin. He was wearing a red plaid shirt, green pants, and sneakers, as well as glasses for his eyes. He was quite kind. He called me and grabbed my hand. He told me that we were going to see some relatives, and he was taking me to the darkness of the street when my mother came out and called me. Since she was looking for me and couldn't find me, he shouted at me to come in, and the man kindly let go of my hand. His gaze conveyed confidence, kindness, and Above all, a peace that I'd never felt before. I'd gotten a little upset since I wanted to go with that man. The peace and happiness that he radiated was something that until today, at 18 years old, I've never seen or felt such a sensation in another human being. Not even in my own family. When he let me go, the man said, "Someday we will meet again." And he walked slowly, disappearing to the immense darkness of the night. I've always asked my mother about that man, who he was, and if it's possible that he had some flyer or kidnapper of infants. She claimed that that night she didn't see anyone with me, and that I was completely alone. I was going into the dark with no one, alone. Those words still leave me thinking today and make me believe, along with other experiences I've had, that life after death is a reality, and it's more complex and full than we believe. Someday we will meet again, son. Something strange happened. I had a thing happen this week that I absolutely cannot explain. I'm sure there's a reasonable explanation, but damned if I truly know what happened. Context. Husband and I have been married 15 years. We've lived in our house 7 years. We have a 14-year-old daughter, and husband and I sleep in separate bedrooms because he snores. So, Friday, husband and I had a kind of pretty angry argument from holiday stress. Oxymoron. Lots of angry words that were said, and I don't think that he meaned. I took a sleeping med, which was Elavil, and went to bed early. I did get up to go to the restroom about 2 a.m. to go to the bathroom, and I noticed my drink cup was in a weird spot. I also noticed my hairspray was on the corner of my counter. I haven't used hairspray in years. I wouldn't have moved it. About 4 a.m., husband comes in asking, did I move or throw things around in his room? Clothes, mostly, like in the hamper. I said no and explained what I had found. Strange. The kicker is my THC vape pen that was always in 1 or 2 places was gone. I know our kid didn't get it because she hates the smell. Our back door was unlocked, and I guess husband forgot because he was upset. I'm feeling honestly like a poltergeist or bad energy was in our house. I've never really believed in aliens, but these drones, was it the Greys? I'm a rational, educated person who can't understand what I went through. Does anybody have any thoughts? Obviously, haven't been sleeping well since then. I most certainly have thoughts, and some of them are... Can ghosts get high? I don't think so. Car simply vanished. Time slip. Anyone have any ideas as to what the hell happened? For context, I'm a dog walker living in the west coast of Scotland. It was a rainy, miserable day sometime in August. I had about 5 dogs in my van to take on a group walk, and as it was rainy, I decided to take them to the beach. It would likely be empty in such a shitty day. As I turned off onto the 1/4 mile track leading down to the beach, I caught up with another car that was driving down there as well. I'll admit I was a bit peeved because I was hoping to get to the beach myself, but there are 2 bays, separated by a load of rocks you can't cross easily. I had 2 separate paths leading down to them from the car park of this particular beach, so figured I'd let these guys park up and see which bay they wanted to go on, and I'd go into the other bay. They sound like me. As I followed the car into the otherwise empty car park, I immediately pulled into the first space on the right, whilst the car I was following appeared to carry on driving right to the end of the car park, about 30, maybe 40 yards long. It's a small car park, more of a field, but whatever. I turned my engine off and looked out my passenger side window, and the car was still driving along. I gave it a minute, and I leaned over to look out the window again, and the car was just inching forwards as if it was finally about to stop. I waited a bit longer, expecting to hear the sound of car doors opening and shutting. I didn't hear anything. So I leaned forwards, looked again, and the car was still inching forwards as though it was just about to stop. It had seemed to be like just about to stop forever at this point. But it didn't strike me as odd. I was just getting impatient, wanting them to just go out and pick a beach and leave me to myself. At this point, the dog started to whine. Presumably a bit confused as to why I had just parked up and sat there and not letting them out. So I decided to get out and open the back door of the van and placate them. They're crated, so they wouldn't be able to jump out. So I got out and walked around the back of my van, glanced over to the car that was still just slowly pulling into its car parking space. At this point, I'm still not thinking anything is off. I just thought this is the slowest driver in the world, and I'm getting a bit impatient. I just want to get on as I have a busy day. After glancing at the car, I opened my back doors. Maybe it would have taken 0.5 to 1 second. Look back at the car again, and it's vanished. There's no sign of it. There's no way in the other end of the car park, and the only way was the way that we both came in. Which would have required the car to turn around, drive past me, and I know this wasn't possible because 1, there simply wasn't enough time for it to have turned around and drove past, and 2, I would have definitely heard it do so. It would have been driving along the track about 1 meter behind me. And 3, I would have seen it driving back up the quarter-mile track that we'd just driven down, and I looked back up there and there were no vehicles. I know this story is a bit boring and it's hard to convey just how impossible this actually is without you fully understanding the layout of this beach and car park, but believe me, this is just impossible. Does anybody have any idea of what happened? The closest thing I can come up with is a time slip. However, people usually report feeling strange, losing time, and also going back significantly in time, whereas I felt nothing but irritation at how long the car was taking to park. Though, in retrospect, the fact I glanced at it several times over the course of about 2 minutes is like just pulling it into its spot every time is a bit strange. The car was pretty modern, and it was a Ford Mondeo estate car with a roof box on it. I didn't make a note of the year, but definitely under 10 years old. Are you doing metric or not metric over there in Scotland? Can a house be haunted in a good way? Here's a question I've been asking myself for a while now. I, a female of 39, have been living in an old house, built approximately in 1820 for 5 years now. Used to be a farm at first, and remained so until after World War II. It's a small town outside of Paris, France. The house has evolved a lot over the years, and as you can see, it doesn't look as old as it is from the outside. Can't see. But it still sports ancient stuff inside, an old bread oven, for instance. Ever since I moved there, I've sometimes had the feeling that there was some sort of presence there. I never actually saw or heard it distinctly. It's more of a quick light that passes by in the corner of my glasses, or something that moves in a nearby mirror as if something passes on the other side of the mirror. Happens either in the living room or in the bathroom or in my older son's room. Sometimes at night, I can feel a cool, steady breeze on my face like a quiet and comforting breath. And in all of these situations, I feel good. Paranormal entities normally terrify me to no end. I've experienced living in a negative haunted house filled with bad energy, and I strongly believe in ghosts and such. I just never heard stories with reassuring entities before. I feel like this entity, and for some reason I really think it's a lady, means nothing but good. Like she's protecting us or something. Could it be a dead relative, or could it be someone that's used to living here? She just feels nice and calm and like she wants me to know that she's around without scaring me at all. And so far, it's what's been happening. I slowly realize that she's here and that she means well. I even sometimes find myself worried when I don't, see or sense her presence for a few weeks. What do you think it could be? Has anything similar ever happened to you? The only time I've seen a white human figure in my basement. So, I'm 23 now. This happened 2 years ago. It was maybe 11 p.m. Can't remember the exact day, but this brings chills down my spine every time I think about it. I've only told 2 people in my life. I'm not into paranormal stuff at all. I know it's odd that I'm posting here, but I'm just looking for any insight into what I experienced. I'll give you a basic layout of my basement. Helps explain what happened. There's a post to the right of my couch, a wall to the left. The only way to head to the washroom is to walk around post toward the back of the couch and down the left side behind the wall. This is relative to the couch facing forward. One night I had to use the washroom, and as I'm walking toward the washroom, I had this really strange feeling to just turn around, which never happens. As I turned my head, all I could see was this human figure made out of just light, standing on the other side of the couch. Now, this light wasn't bright or anything. My lights were on, and it just kind of matched the room's light, so I had a good look at it. Couldn't see through it or anything, it was just there. It was standing and staring at me for at least 2 or 3 seconds. I felt nothing. My heart didn't race, I was just fascinated, but it seemed like it was caught off guard at the fact that I was staring directly at it. So it ran, sprinted toward the opposite side of the room, and as soon as it passed behind the post, it completely disappeared. This was the only time I've ever seen anything like that in my life. I've never had any paranormal encounters in my life besides that. It was odd because it was like another person was in my house just curiously looking at me. Didn't have a face, and the best way I can describe it was like a human form made of pure white light, but besides that, it seemed more scared of me than I was of it. It wasn't until it disappeared when I felt this surge of what the fuck just happened. I started to understand the weight of what I just saw. I was dead sober. I don't drink or smoke. My house is only 6 years old at the time, and no one lived in it before. I don't have any dead relatives either. Everybody has dead relatives. Is there anybody who might know what could have been or maybe experienced something exactly like it? It was both terrifying and a crazy experience. Thinking my house from circa 1890 might have spirits. Last month, my sister and I moved into this old house from around 1890. Might have been 1860, can't remember. Since moving here, there's been some strange stuff going on that, for all I know, could just be a coincidence or easily explainable. First is our backyard light. It has a motion detector on it, and I often see it turn on for no reason when I'm looking out the window. Could just be a malfunction, but I don't know. Especially considering one experience I had. Second, on many mornings I come downstairs to the kitchen and find several of our cupboards wide open. This could very well be the result of the house being so old and possibly drafty. Never seems to be the same ones. In general, there isn't a pattern, like none of the doors feel loose at all, and they all feel tight and have magnetic latches. One really unsettling occurrence has to do with our basement lights. We have a basement that has those short and wide windows that go out to ground level, and we can see them from outside. On several occasions, I've gone out at night, seen lights shining in the windows, not reflections, and I looked closely, and they were definitely the basement lights. Then gone back inside to find that the lights are off. One creepy experience I had was when I was feeding my sister's dog. The dog's food bowls are in a small mudroom and, coat room area, whatever it's called. that leads out into the backyard. There's this closet adjacent to the back door containing the dog food. It was late at night and I went to grab some food for the dog, and as soon as I opened that closet door, I felt a strong presence and suddenly got really nervous. Ignoring this, I reached in and it was very cold. Not like the air was cold, but it was almost like a physical thing was there. Something that I was touching that was making a portion of my arm ice cold. When I turned around to put the food in the dog bowl, I got a sudden chill on my back. It felt like something moved into me from the closet. The scariest part was that right as the feeling faded, the motion detector light that I mentioned earlier suddenly turned on, as if whatever was in the closet moved out into the backyard. This next bit is leaning into the realm of wishful thinking, but I thought it was worth bringing up. My sister claims to sometimes see apparitions, auras, shadow people, ever since she had a near-death experience. The primary reason I believe her is because of an incident at her old apartment. I was in my bedroom in bed with my cat when he started staring at a spot directly above where my head rested, as if something was there. He stared at it for several minutes, and soon after I got up to grab some water, my sister was still awake and I commented on my lack of sleep. She happened to peer into my bedroom and said that she saw a dark floating figure in there, the exact spot where my cat had been looking. Anyway, back to this house. My sisters claimed to see several different apparitions in the house in various forms. During a recent night, every time she entered my bedroom, she would just get startled and jump back, saying she saw for a split second the figure of someone standing right beside my nightstand, the corner next to my closet. Also, in relation to my bedroom, I sometimes hear this loud scratching coming from inside my walls, but only in one spot next to my desk. Could very well be a mouse, though. I'll try to get a video of it sometime and update this thread with the link. On one particularly creepy night, I was hanging out in my sister's bedroom watching TV with her. That's when she said that she saw something outside her sliding glass doors that led to the backyard. She described it as smoky and dog-like. Moments later, the motion detector light flicked on. I closed the curtains to help her feel better, but she seemed pretty disturbed and asked me not to go to bed. It was around 3 or 4 a.m. at this point. I stayed for a while, but soon enough more weird stuff started happening. I heard a noise like paper being scratched on the other side of her bed. And there was indeed paper there, but it stopped moving as soon as I looked. Then as I walked away, I swear I felt something poke me in a spot right above my left ass cheek. Yeah, it's ridiculous, and I joked about it to myself to make myself less scared. That's about it so far. All of this has been happening over a month or so we've lived here. Please let me know your thoughts on everything. I'm curious to know if anybody else has had a similar experience. I don't know what to say about my first sleep paralysis. Never had any sleep paralysis up until this point. Never experienced it again after this. I was laying on our queen-sized bed facing the wall with my back exposed to the rest of the bed. I was trying to fight the urge to fall asleep, but I eventually dozed off into a state in which I felt like I was both awake and asleep. Take note that before this I had checked the time on my phone. As I was in that state, my body couldn't move and my vision was starting to tunnel. Throughout this experience, I could only see the wall in front of me as I was laying on my side. I started to see shadows form around my vision. My hearing, I don't know how to describe this, but it felt like something was covering my ears, so the sounds I heard was a bit muffled. I began to hear high-pitched sounds, which eventually turned into screams. Sounded like burning souls from hell, squealing from that pain. For some moments, I felt like I saw those souls. Their voices overlapped, and I soon began to feel something. Since I was laying near the wall, a huge portion of the bed was behind me. Behind me, I can feel someone or something crawling rapidly. Their limbs were pounding on the bed as it makes its way toward me. However, just as I feel like they're about to reach me, they never do. While I was hearing those screams and feel like something was crawling behind me, my mind was actually, to put it simply, a bit calm. But the way my body reacts says otherwise. My heart was pounding in my chest and I felt like I could barely breathe. In my mind, I kept on thinking, why is my body reacting like this? It's like I had no control over my body. And I'm generally not the type of person to hyperventilate or react that much when something happens. So my body reacted like that and I was genuinely confused. The moment I woke up from that sleep paralysis, my vision began to clear and for a split second I felt like I'd forgotten how to breathe. The experience was not that long, but it was surely more than a minute. But when I checked the time on my phone again, it was still the same time from when I checked it before. What kind of bothers me is that most of these indications of hell in some of my dreams, including the sleep paralysis with the screams of the dead, my dreams are always, hyper-realistic. Although I don't generally dream as often now, it still sometimes bothers me. Did I contact a spirit? So a few weeks ago, I started learning dowsing. I bought a beginner's kit. For those who might not know, dowsing, the type I practice, is basically using a pendulum to questions. You give it a direction for you to answer. For example, left to right and vice versa means no, and away from you to closer to you and vice versa means yes. So after following the guide on how to train the pendulum on answering yes or no questions, I decided to start messing with it. I asked it questions like, am I in such and such place? And am I holding such and such object? After checking that, indeed the answers were correct. I started asking other questions until I decided to ask, is there a spirit in the room? The answer was yes. I started asking it more questions such as, is the pendulum moving because of the spirit? And, am I talking to the spirit? Both questions were answered with a yes. After some time, I figured out he's male and he's a spirit. He refuses to give me his age. When I ask what his age is by assigning each direction a number, like 0 to 50, 50 to 100, the pendulum stops moving. When I asked him, will you tell me your age? He said no. I also figured out his name is Uthgaz. Uthgaz, or Uthgaz. After many questions, Uthgaz tells me there's a demon haunting me, and he was forced by a more powerful being to protect me from it. He said he doesn't want to do it, but he has to. He also confirmed the demon haunting me is indeed the figure I've been seeing ever since I remember. Some context on the demon. Ever since I was little, I've seen a humanoid figure watching me. It's covered in gray hair, has abnormally long legs and arms, and has no face. It also has some horn-like things on both sides of its head. I wouldn't call them horns, though. It's hard to explain. I normally see it standing next to my bed, but I've seen it in my old school and in streets, even in the shower. It was always standing there and watching. But it's gone further than that. I've seen it standing behind my friends, grabbing their heads. They're oblivious to it, though. The worst has been when I'm taking a shower. I closed my eyes and I felt something weird touching my belly. I opened my eyes to see it right in front of me, its hand on my belly. It disappeared while I was frozen in terror. So, back to the original question. I know there's a big chance Uthgaz doesn't exist, and it's just my subconscious mind inventing it all and transferring it to the pendulum through micro hand movements. That would be a scientific answer. But ever since, I may have contacted Uthgaz, the demon has been more pacific. Or oceanic, to say the least. I tried searching Uthgaz online and I got no result. If anyone knows anything that might be useful here or has lived something similar, please let me know. Any information is deeply appreciated. Wish you all a great day. Has anyone encountered the Hat Man before? During my childhood and late teens in the 2000s, I was a very, very vivid dreamer. I could basically command myself to dream vividly. I had a dream one time about him. When I was a kid in the late 2000s. Keep in mind, I didn't know who the Hat Man was back then. In my dream, I found myself surrounded by trees. I realized very quickly that it was the forest next to my old school. I had fun in the beginning, but I realized that I was not alone in the forest. The dream played out in daytime, so it was an easy spot to find anything. Anyways, when I walked around in the woods, I noticed a dark figure in the distance. It just stood there watching me. This figure was darkness itself and had a black trench coat and black fedora hat. Freakiest part was that this figure was surrounded by this dark, visible aura. It almost looked like smoke from a fire, but darker. I freaked out, ran through the woods toward my school. This figure kept the same distance all the time, but I never saw him move. I ran into the school and hid in a dressing room. The last thing that happened was that I could feel him just outside the room coming closer and closer, and then I woke up. Have you had any similar experiences? Has anyone felt or heard electricity before? Yeah. During my childhood and late teens, I apparently experienced electricity differently from others. In school, whenever we were going to watch TV in the mid-2000s, I could tell before I went to the classroom, like 20 or 30 meters away, that we were going to watch TV. It's like a static noise and a feeling. Hard to describe. I could stand at the end of the hallway and tell my friends, "Nice, we're going to watch TV today." Their response was always, "How do you know?" I explained to them about the static noise, and they looked at me as if I were stupid. I could also hear what I can only describe as electrical currents traveling through rooms. It's the same noise as the TV. The difference is that it feels alive. I could sit somewhere and feel it come into the room. The closer it got to me, the higher the static-sounding feeling would get. After a while, it would get out of the room, and it was almost as if it were walking around the room. I know it sounds frickin' weird. One time, it was really scary. I'd gone to bed one night. I laid with my face against the wall. A couple of minutes later, I felt this electricity come in from my room. I felt how it came closer and closer to my bedside. The electricity became stronger and stronger. I realized that this thing or whatever was leaning down toward me inches away from me. I had to squint my eyes because the static sound and feeling from it was really strong, and because I was afraid. About 5 minutes later, it slowly disappeared out from the room. Anyways, my 20s had disappeared completely. Still sensitive to other sounds. Usually no one else can hear them, which makes me feel crazy sometimes. Don't feel crazy on that one. I have my own story about that. A good one. Has anyone seen an entity that looks human but has no face? 10 years ago, when I went to bed, I dozed off for about 2 minutes when I suddenly heard something move by my window to the right. I looked at the window and I noticed that the blinds curved upwards as if something were between the blinds and the windowsill. As I regained my senses, I realized to my horror that a figure was crawling in through the window. I laid there in horror, not knowing what to do apart from staring at it. It was pale and had long brown hair. The moment I stared at it, it stopped in its tracks. On all fours, it slowly moved its head toward me, and I shit you not, it had no face. It was completely smooth where the face should have been, like a mannequin. I jolted out of my bed and ran out into the hallway and took my baseball bat. I barged into the room and there was no one there and the window was closed. By the way, I live on the 3rd floor with no fire escape. A couple of weeks later, I sat on the balcony during sundown when suddenly something caught my eye. On the roof on the opposite building, I saw a head peek up, and a couple of seconds later it slowly went down and disappeared. Of course, there could be logical explanations for all of this, but maybe I hadn't fully woken up yet. The head peeking up could have been a bird. It wasn't sleep paralysis because I could move the whole time, but to this day it scares me. Someone told me it could have been some kind of forest spirit. Have you ever seen anything alike? My mother almost drowned as a kid. This is her story. When my mother was a child, 5 or 10 years old, she and her grandmother went to the beach. While her grandmother sat on the beach, my mother walked knee-deep in the water. Somehow she went too deep. That's 2 O's. Fell down, went underneath the water. She lost the perception on what direction up and down was, and she fought some time but slowly lost the energy to continue. While she floated under the dark, murky water, she could hear her words, the most beautiful music ever. For some reason, she could never hum it or explain it. The music was otherworldly. While she drifted around under the water, hearing this otherworldly music, a face slowly showed up in front of her. It was an old man. This man smiled at her and he said, "It's not your time yet." And right after that, he said that, and his face disappeared, and she felt a hand grip around her leg. By great force, she was pulled out of the water. She gasped for air while her grandmother scolded her for walking too far out into it. Have you or maybe a family member had any similar experience? My mother's friend's scary encounter. Demonic? ? My mother's friend had seen spirits and communicated with them for a long time. It all started after a traffic accident in her late teens. This is one of her stories. About 25 years ago, she lived by herself on a farm. It was an old house, probably over 100 years old. One night when she just had gone to bed, she felt a presence. At first, she didn't want to open her eyes because it felt malicious. But after a couple of minutes, she felt that she really needed to. She opened her eyes, and at her bedside, a tall beast with yellow eyes stood in its hind legs looking at her. It snarled at her while drooling. The shock and fear it gave her made her freeze. She closed her eyes and whispered, "Go away," over and over again. After a couple of minutes, the presence she felt had disappeared. She opened her eyes and it was gone, like it vanished in front of her. The beast she saw, she could only describe it as being a dark-haired jackal. She said that it had the resemblance of Anubis. Knocking on wall and door. It was 5 a.m. on Christmas. That's because my sleeping schedule is bad. But I heard 2 sets of knocks on the front door, which is basically right next to my wall and behind my head where I sleep, meaning that I can hear anyone and anything, even an animal on the porch, and every car that pulls into the gravel driveway. Anyways, I sit still, thinking it was my mom, and wait for my grandmother to open the door because the dog started barking, which normally wakes her up. She didn't wake up, but my cousin did from the barking and checked the peephole to see no one there. Mind you, I'm still in bed waiting for the door to open for my quote-unquote mom, but I don't hear anything. I didn't hear her going back to her room, so I got dressed and go and see what's wrong. She's there and confused and kind of freaked out while telling me no one's there, and then I go on and tell her how I heard 2 sets of knocks that were kind of faint, as in regarding the time being 5 a.m. kind of knocks. Well, we talk about it for a while, and the more I think, I realize I didn't hear no car pull in. I didn't hear anyone walk in or off the porch. And I could have sworn I heard my mom's voice faintly calling to the dog through the door to let her know it's my mom to stop barking between the knocks. Ever since that day, I felt a heavy feeling on my chest. I'm more paranoid about the dark and hate going to the bathroom at night. Fast forward to literally an hour ago at 6:40 a.m. where I'm laying in my side of the bed watching videos, and I start to hear this faint to loud knocking. It was one set, almost like 10 knocks in a pattern on my wall behind me, sounding like it was inside my house, not on the outside this time. I lay there frozen while my heart is beating out of my chest and my eyes are wide open. I finally sit up and try not to throw up and cry as I call my grandmother to come in here with me and tell her everything from Christmas to now. Another weird thing to point out is this time the knock was way louder, but the dog never barked, which freaked me out even more. My grandmother was awake but didn't hear it either. The more the days go on, I'm terrified what it wants. Terrified what it wants to do to me, and when it'll leave me alone. I understand it's getting a reaction out of me, but what am I really supposed to do but get scared? Another thing to mention is I've always heard knocks for years, but have never felt this heavy feeling or paranoia lingering for so long. In my last house, it was like 4 years ago, so I'd sleep on the couch and I would hear faint knocks on the window above my head and it would scare the crap out of me. I'm all alone and the window's kind of tall. I don't know what to do about the situation because I'm scared it's going to get worse. The more it knocks, the more it's feeding off my anxiety and emotions, so help me understand what's going on and maybe why this is happening to me. Shadow behind locked doors. I used to live in a shared rented flat with other girls. One day everyone was out, and I was alone on my floor studying. My room door was shut. The door had a small gap at the bottom, so if somebody passed by, you could see their shadow through it. That day as I was studying, I noticed someone walk past my door. I wasn't surprised because I thought it was one of the girls. Let's call her Jane. It was about the time Jane usually came back. The shadow crossed once toward the open area on the right and then back again toward her room on the left. Shortly after, I heard her room door open and shut, so I assumed it was her. About half an hour later, somebody knocked on the main door to the floor. Since Jane's room was close to the main door, well, I just expected her to answer it. I didn't even bother to get up. However, after 5 or 6 knocks, I got up to open the door myself. When I checked, I noticed Jane's door was shut. I opened the main door, and to my surprise, it was Jane standing there. I was confused, but I was so engrossed in my studies that I didn't think much of it. I let her in and went back to my room. 5 minutes later, Jane came into my room and asked if I had drunk water from her copper jug. I said no, and she told me she clearly remembered filling the jug before leaving, but now it was half empty. That's when it struck me. I had seen someone inside, and I had heard her door open earlier. And even more bizarre, the main door had been locked from the inside all along. The open area where I saw the shadow go was also locked. I told Jane everything, and she was so shaken that she threw away the water from the jug. We never knew who or what that was. Any ideas? A few. Lady in White, Blood Red Child. This happened with one of my friends, and I'm going to share the story from his point of view. I was driving home late one night around 12:30 a.m. It was nothing unusual for me. This was my weekly routine. I was used to these late-night drives, so I wasn't scared or even thinking about anything serious. It was winter and the roads were pretty empty, so I was driving at around 90 or 120 kilometers an hour. Then I came to a bridge. The air near the water was more foggy due to the underwater, So I slowed down, dropped my speed to exactly 38 kilometers an hour. And that's when I saw her. A woman, dressed completely in white, standing on the side of the bridge alone. Now, I'm not one of those people who does stupid things in situations like this, so stopping wasn't even on my mind. But my car stopped on its own. I froze for a second, completely startled, and that's when I noticed she was holding a child in her arms. I don't know what came over me, but I rolled down the window and asked, "Do you want to go somewhere?" She didn't answer. She just stood there and slowly raised her hand, pointing down toward the river below. And that's when I made the mistake of looking at the child. His face was bright red, blood red. Can't even explain it in words. It was not normal. And after all this, I even wonder if it was even human. The fear after looking at the child kind of snapped senses in me right then, like I was back in control of my body. My mom's old advice flashed through my head, and I did exactly that. Spat in their direction. Then I slammed my foot in the accelerator and drove as fast as I possibly could. I didn't look back, not even once. To this day, I can't explain what happened. Why did my car stop, and why did I talk to her, and who was that woman and the child in her arms? And what exactly was she pointing at? Imagine if that was an actual person and you spit at her, holding up a kid. We'll go with the paranormal, though. Weird experiences in my new apartment. Hearing voices and seeing things. I wanted to share a couple of strange experiences that have happened to me since I moved into this new apartment. I'm not really sure what to make of them. For some context, a few months ago I moved out into my hometown and into a new city to live with my boyfriend. The apartment's older. I think it's built in 1893, and was apparently used as a post office for a while. But nothing unusual or haunted about its history as far as I knew. Anyway, here's what happened. The first incident was a few weeks after I moved in. I was sitting at my desk working on a uni task with my in-ear headphones on. These headphones are super soundproof. I always blast my music so I can focus without distractions. Suddenly, I clearly hear my older brother's voice say my name. It wasn't muffled, it was as if he were right there. He even sounded concerned. I jumped, turned around, and nothing. My boyfriend was in another room, and even if he had been nearby, I would have heard him through my headphones. I went and asked him if he'd said anything, and he hadn't. I tried to brush it off as my imagination or something, but then a few weeks later another strange thing happened. I was in the same situation. I was at my desk, headphones on, totally focused. Out in the corner of my eye, I suddenly saw my mom's cat walk by. The thing is, I don't have a cat here. My mom's cat is back in my hometown. Both times I felt totally confused, but not scared. Just really unsettled and confused. Except for the weirdness of it, I don't feel like it's something bad, but I'm still wondering if I'm going crazy or not. As I said, I looked into the history of the building, but aside from its age and its past as a post office, there doesn't seem to be a lot of information about it, and particularly no spooky or unusual things about it. Could this just be my mind playing tricks on me, or could there be something else going on? Anybody else experience something similar? Red-Eye Woman in the Mirror. Has anyone else ever seen a similar entity? As a child, I lived in an abusive home from ages 7 to 13. It was terrifying and left me with complex PTSD that I still am working through today. I've made a lot of progress, and I feel that we need better laws to protect victims since the abusers never face punishment for his actions. At age 10, the abuse was quite violent. I'll never forget this woman. I was alone in my room, my door was locked, and I didn't know what to do about the abuse because no one believed me. I remember just wanting everything to end, and looking back, this was probably the first time I went into a suicidal type of thinking. I looked in the mirror and everything was dark. I saw an older woman with long black hair with bright red eyes staring back at me. She seemed angry and intense. She was summoning me to her. I had a sense something was very, very, very wrong. It felt like I was in a trance. I couldn't move, and it was like I was being drawn to her in the dark. I had to physically shake myself to get back to reality. I don't know how long it was, but it was a very intense experience. She was gone, my room was bright, and I saw my blonde self reflected in the mirror. The abuse did get worse after this, but eventually my dad believed me and divorced from that family. I always wonder who that woman was. We were living in South Texas at the time, and I haven't seen her since, but her presence in that moment never escaped me. I know it could have been a trauma response, but I also strongly believe in spirits, all with varying intentions on us. Any ideas on who this was or any similar experiences? Well, the other idea was that she was an earlier, angrier version of an ancestor who was wronged. I see some similarities to another entity who I work toward healing, and it doesn't really bother me as often as she did in my early healing journey. She also had long black hair and lots of anger, but never with the red eyes. This one would show up when I was doing ancestor meditation and yell at me, but now she's more peaceful. I met with a medium last year who helped me with the calming of this entity. It went really well. Maybe this was the same one, still open to ideas. I'm convinced there's something attached to me, ruining my life. Let me start by saying these events are all 100% legit. You can believe whatever you choose, of course, but these are all true and are just what I experienced from my own point of view. So I'm currently in the worst time in my life. I recently lost my job, have no friends or family who care about me in the least, and despite always trying my best to be a good person and work hard, can't find any work or means to change things. I know so far this sounds like me just crying and giving a sob story, but I only say these things to give me some perspective, or rather give you some perspective on how I got here. I used to be incredibly happy and inspired, as well as believing I could do anything I believe I could. Had many loving friends, great relationship with my family, until one night I believe something happened. I'd been living in a condo with some friends, and we needed another roommate to help with rent. Since there was an extra room, we posted an ad. We had this guy in that week. The guy seemed cool enough at first. Maybe a bit strange, but who isn't at least a little? We actually became decent friends after some time, and I hung out with him and his friend one night. And that was when the first red flag came up. When he was away from us a bit, one of his friends suddenly, he's serious. He asks me if I've noticed anything strange with my roommate. I'm gonna call him Bob. I said, not really, Bob seems okay. Maybe he just keeps to himself a bit, but I'm kind of the same. They all stopped talking amongst themselves and started telling me about how when they first met him, he was very different. I guess they'd never met, like, any sort of family of his, and that he was into strange demonic type of almost ritualistic stuff. That is weird. They didn't elaborate much on it, but told me just to be careful, which I kind of laughed and brushed it off, thinking it must have been a joke. After this, life went on for... After this, life went on. And in our free time, we would try and meet girls online, since we were single bachelors and whatnot. Sometimes one of us would have the other tag along because the girl would have a friend and ask if we had somebody for them. One night this happened, and it was him and I. We all set it up, and the night went great. Thought we stayed the night with them, and as I'm ready to leave, I knock on the girl's door that had just stayed with him to grab him. That's when he answers, walking out quickly, saying he's ready to go. I noticed the girl sitting on her bed with tears running down her face. I was shocked and immediately asked if she was okay, to which she nodded. He, already at the door, yells for me to come on, and he's got things to do. Red flag number 8. I looked back to her, and she just gave me this look, and I still see in my head that I can't figure out what exactly she was thinking, but it was enough to have never left my memories. So, I had last mentioned this guy was strange and into some possibly demonic stuff before I met him. I had later found out that during that night with the whole upset girl incident, he had actually been angry with me, because apparently the girl I had ended up connecting, wink wink, that was actually the girl he was originally talking to beforehand. I'm confused now. He was mad things didn't play out like he wanted, unbeknownst to me, of course. That planted the seeds for this growing resentment that he had for me, and yeah, it's completely subjective, but it's my thoughts on it. So, eventually, everything added up to him randomly and stealing my phone, after which we'd all been chilling in his room. Being us and some friends, mind you, but I had accidentally left the phone in his room during the night. This wasn't due to lack of me trying to grab it, though. I had knocked and knocked many times through the night. What was extra crazy is that he ignored my knocks, and in the morning claimed he had headphones on and couldn't hear me. Also claimed my phone wasn't in there and tried blaming it on the friend that were over, which was absurd. Get this, though. He magically had the same exact phone as my lost phone 1 week later, which, long story short, led him to no longer living with us because I had had it with him by this point. Keep in mind, there were many other smaller incidents that also happened, but they're mostly petty things that you wouldn't care about. So, jumping to the last time that we had actually hung out before that whole phone situation. We had been on another double date. You went on another? We were all in the car talking, and then at one point the supernatural topic came up, which put us in a spooky mood. Well, dude suggests me go to the cemetery that he knows not too far away, so we do. While we're all there, things are chill at first. We're walking and joking, and I'm trying to spook out the girls in the corny ways we do. When suddenly, out of nowhere, roommate just screams out, "I command any demons here to possess myself and follow me until death." Oh, well, possess the protagonist here. We all stood there speechless until one of the girls said that she was tired and wanted to go home. A week later, the phone incident happened, and I've never heard from him again. Cut to today, and ever since that happened, I swear to you my life has been shittier and shittier and pretty much at every turn. Like I haven't been able to catch a break ever. Also, people I try to get close to, friends or more, their lives appear to get affected too, like I'm rubbing off on them. That's mainly why I'm such a loner now. Can't stand the thought that I'm the reason bad things happen to the ones I care about. It's seeming to get worse as time goes by too. Any job I've been able to get, something dumb happens that ruins my chances of moving up in the company. And now, despite trying everything, applying absolutely everywhere, even McDonald's, I can't find work anywhere. Any interview I've managed to get, I can tell almost immediately that they have no interest in hiring me. I try my best regardless, and always have a smile on my face because it's always the darkest before dawn, right? I don't know if what happened that night really had any effect on my life, well, if not then, my luck has taken a massive hit, and that shit was critical hit. I got some things to say, but I'm going to hold them. Strange object seen as a child. This is one of the only times in my life that to this day I still don't understand what I was seeing. This happened sometime in the late 90s. I was between the ages of 7 to 10, I believe. During one summer, I was outside playing. As I was walking up to the steps to go back inside, I looked up and spotted this super strange object floating in the sky, maybe 10 to 15 feet above me, but a little ways, like it was coming closer. At first, I thought it was like a kite, but immediately I knew it couldn't be because there's no wind really, and it was staying at the same height, moving at maybe about 5 to 8-ish miles an hour toward me. The best way I can describe it is like a cube, but it's moving and reshaping into itself, almost like a 4D object, like a tesseract, I think it's called. I remember I was so shocked and scared that I had my hand on the doorknob to go inside, but was frozen because I was scared to look away for fear of losing it. I wanted so badly to yell inside for somebody to come look, but I knew it would be gone in a mere moment. So I just stared at it noiselessly, and it went by me. It was so close I felt I could almost jump and touch it, but it was just out of reach. Till this day, I don't know what the hell that was, and this was in the late 90s, so there weren't drones around. I'm hoping somebody's seen something similar, or has any theories on what it could have been. Drones around that we know of. Dad's strange encounter as a teen. When my dad was 17 or 18, he remembers lying in his bed, unable to sleep at around midnight. The street lamp light from the other side of the street always hit the wall and ceiling in his room. It was deadly quiet in the street, as it was the 1970s in Belfast. My dad lived off Falls Road, and there was a curfew imposed in the British Army, so no one was allowed out after dark. Suddenly, my dad hears the sound of someone sprinting down the street and sees a break in the streetlight on his wall. He jumps up and looks out the window to see who is running. No one is there. He keeps looking for a few minutes to see if anyone was hiding in the gardens, expecting to see an army or the police Land Rover to appear, looking for somebody, but nothing appears. He shrugs it off, goes back to lying down, but minutes later he hears exactly the same sounds. And again he jumps up to look, but nothing. That's when he was about to go back to lying down again and hears the running sound once more. But this time he's like, well, he's there to see it. He sees a shadow cast on the house and pavement that grows and shrinks with the angle of the light being cast. He hears the footsteps get louder and fainter, but can't see a person, a dog, or anything that makes footsteps. He didn't sleep that night or properly for a few weeks trying to listen out for the sounds, but it never did happen again. Was it paranormal, or was my dad just having sleep issues living in an area plagued with fighting, violence, and death? Not sure myself. My dad isn't a believer in ghosts, but he knows what he saw and heard what was strange and has stuck with him for over 50 years. Ghostly voice or tiredness. Started a new job in August. It's a small team of staff, and a lot of the time it's me and my director in the same office. The buildings are very old, dating back to the 1920s or 30s, and have housed many businesses since my employer bought them over 20 years ago. I was in very early one morning to catch up on missing a day, and I was sitting down with a coffee and sorting out my emails and what jobs needed to be done that day. That's when I heard a woman's voice say, "Humph," or in my ear. I turned my head toward the door, expecting my boss to walk in, but no one was there. I got up and looked out into the hallway, into the small kitchen unit, but no one. I even go down the stairs to see if anybody was in the unit below ours. It's as if you can hear them talking if it's quiet. Still no one. I then thought maybe the sound came from my laptop, maybe a Spotify advertisement or a YouTube video that was still loaded and hit the play by accident. But the only app open was email and Adobe InDesign. Sat for a good 10 minutes trying to figure out what it could have been, but honestly, I cannot explain it. Weather was calm, and it was 7 a.m., so no one was expecting to be in for at least another 2 hours. What do you guys think I heard?